Hey, good morning, everyone. Just want to do a quick thought on the economy. So I just watched a couple of videos on, first one's Fox Business, posted today. Um, the title is "The Peak in Economic Activity is Behind Us." Stephanie Pomboy. It's a good one to check out. And then I watched another one, Gap looking to close hundreds of stores at malls quickly and aggressively. So this is a very amazing time, in my opinion, where, and I've done an analogy like this in the past in one of my past videos about the money supply. So fundamentally, if it's not already known already, this is, I believe, becoming more and more mainstream and known now that, first of all, the stock market jitters and all that are governed by high frequency trading. Um, a lot of people's retirement 401ks are locked up where they're not allowed to self-direct it unless they leave a company. That's just a fact. Some companies in the past, I remember when I worked at Schlumberger, they did allow you to self-direct. Most people chose not to. I have a feeling more and more people are now. And I have a feeling more and more people are doing it largely because they're unemployed and they need to start, they're depleting those savings. And so they don't publish those figures because those figures would be the ones that are truly governing whether we're growing or we're deteriorating. It's like how many people have opened 401k accounts would dictate, the number of new grads that are actually getting jobs and then opening 401k accounts, having faith in the country that they're working in. That would be a major good telltale sign to report that. But then on the flip side of that, which I have a feeling is happening more, is people not necessarily closing their accounts, but depleting their savings and potentially closing them, exhausting them. And I've mentioned that I'm not too far away from that myself. And so, these are the real metrics of what's actually going on. But like I said, the mainstream media is just always behind, but they're catching up because there's no way to hide it. Now it's visible. It's like the Gap is talking about closing hundreds of stores, and they posted a stat. Let me see, like right at the end. Yeah, if you go to the 54-second mark of this 1 minute and 13-second long video, posted again today on CNBC television on YouTube, they have currently 775 Gap stores around the world. The title of the video is Gap looking to close hundreds of stores at malls, in quotes, quickly and aggressively. So hundreds, I mean, that's vague. Obviously they know. Like I've worked at Bed Bath and Beyond, and they know precisely how many stores that they're planning to close, in advance. You can take my word for it, but just it makes sense, that they would know. So they're saying hundreds to be vague. Let's just say it's 100, just to be conservative. But they said hundreds, so let's again, for the sake of conservativeness, that's one out of almost every 8 stores is being closed. And so that's a pretty significant amount of stores that are being closed. And then that's one thing, obviously that many stores will not exist. The worry now is obviously the individuals that work there, which are usually like younger people or part-timers or summer students and all that need that job to save up for school or whatever. They're now unemployed. And then so the conventional wisdom or what the mainstream will feed us is that, of course, another company will just come and occupy that space. Not true. If you look at, there's a YouTube channel called Dead Mall Series. You'll see this guy literally just goes into malls that have been not just abandoned with 1 or 2 stores, but like they're just virtually empty. They're just depleted. So it's this is like one step towards that. And then people will also then say, that to finish that first thought, these people are unemployed who will need these jobs. And then the thing is that people will say that store will get replaced with another store, that person will have the same opportunity to work, which, if the other video that I was watching is true, the peak in economic activity is behind us, according to Stephanie Pomboy, and it's true. And she's basically in her quick video, she's saying liquidity is drying out worldwide. Central banks are contracting their balance sheets, which is true, and which means that they're not, they're not just giving kind of like an open credit card, a blank check to the world and just buying everything that people don't want. And so that's what they mean when they say liquidity is drying up, is that banks are not purchasing this taking the other side of the bet, for lack of a better term, in the markets. They're not just letting the people lose and then absorbing all of their losses to maintain quote unquote stability. That's not happening. And so this contraction that's happening, it does have immediate impact on the economy. So if the peak is behind us and stores are closing, what makes us think that the Gap units that are inside of a mall will just like automatically be replaced by something else? It's these malls would not be closing, if that were the case. If there were stores closing, but then another store would just naturally fill in right afterwards, we wouldn't have a dead mall series on YouTube. And it's not just one mall. You should check out that channel. It's eerie actually when he walks through these malls that once potentially housed many stores and sort of a vibrant marketplace. And so that's a major issue, because then these store closings, even if it's like 1 in 8, has multiplicative effects. This is the thing with contraction, and it does happen quickly and aggressively. That's a fact. And so once the domino falls, the first one, it doesn't take long for the other ones to fall, because it does have immediate impact on people, young people who are using that money to pay for their tuition, to pay for their car payments, any number of payments, their mortgage or their rent and all these kind of things. And so that's a major issue. And, these people are unemployed, and then, it puts even more stress on the job market, because then now you have more applicants per open requisition. And so that's happening. And then another narrative that they'll say, which I'll debunk, is that these jobs are moving towards online. So I've worked for Amazon as well, and this is probably not inside information or anything brilliant or insightful. It's obvious that a company like that would have to maintain all of its costs in a variable nature. And what I mean by that is Amazon is probably the best company in human history at this point to ensure that all of their costs are variable depending on how much activity there is. So they will make, and I worked in one of their warehouses, in one of their sort centers, their operation facilities in operations finance. And we were essentially required, and a major part of our job as site controllers was to ensure that all of our costs are as variable as possible. Obviously, you can't make every cost variable, but we even worked and made models to make the security variable. So if things were lighter and there were less people in the building, we would actually trim down our security staff. And even something like that one would think is fixed, we made that variable. Even the lease itself, Amazon had a very aggressive contracts group in Seattle that will ensure that if activity dries up and all that they're able to get out of their leases without getting financially dinged that much. And so when we sign up in an apartment, and if we break our lease, we get absolutely mollywopped over the head with 2 or 3 months penalty, and maybe not even allowed to get out of the lease. Amazon does not do that. Like when they negotiate for a facility, that city basically needs them to come to create jobs, and they'll allowed to kind of bully them, for a contract that's favorable to them, and that's just good business. It's aggressive, but it's logical. And so people will say, oh no, well, it's moving to online. But the problem is that Amazon is so successful because they streamline things, they factor out waste. Really, that's the only way they can get us packages as efficiently as they do. I don't use it that much anymore. I don't really like their business practices and stuff, so I'm not rah about the company, especially because I've seen it from the inside. But this is why they are quote unquote successful. It's actually a form of off balance sheet financing where a lot of their cost structures and all their heavy quote unquote capex or capital expenditures are taken off the balance sheet and made into what are income statement items and made variable, made month to month essentially. And so it takes a lot of the risk off. It allows them to kind of turn a dial to ramp up things or to slow things down quickly, and like one example, and I don't think this is like a trade secret, it's people do it, is that they flex their shifts up and down on the increments of a half an hour. And so if they notice that a truck is delayed or a major shipment coming into our center was delayed or something happened to it and the volume will not be there for that day, they'll flex the shifts down for everybody and let them go early. And so they win, and the employee loses because they should technically be forced to pay them for 30 minutes of no work because it's not their fault. But they have these things called flex shifts, allows them again to turn that knob up or down. And again, ultimately the employee loses because they're counting on that money for whatever. And actually I have a story about that. I remember I got a phone call from somebody at the office, and they were like, "Can I talk to HR? I have a question about my paycheck." And I was like, "Yeah, no one's here right now, but if you come in, someone will be here and can answer your question." I guess the phone that I had was a person from HR in the past, and so the call came to me, and the guy was like, I don't know if I can actually afford the gas to get there, to discuss this. So like, this is not funny, but that's the first time in my life I've ever had to think about the reality that certain people are budgeting their gas to that level. Like I just, and I'm very thankful obviously for this. Like I've never had to think about, gas, like, hey, like, do I have enough in my budget for gas to go somewhere or something? Like this is the reality for many, 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 many people in America. And so it's, again, not presented on mainstream media, which is more and more reason to believe Fox News, which in numerology, Fox is 666, that we're dealing with a satanic system here. Again, all under the watchful eye of the Most High, the Heavenly Father. And so that's this is the economy that we live in right now. And to me, this is what was supposed to be a recovery from 2008 has just gotten worse. And so what's happening when liquidity dries up, they use liquidity as like a fancy word, like it's something that they don't want people to like understand. Money supply is just what it is. The stock market value, all of the things that are quote unquote valued in the world at a certain dollar amount, is driven by one thing and one thing alone, and that is the money supply worldwide, now that we live in an interconnected world financially. And so the money supply is contracting. And then so what happens when money supply contracts? Interest rate goes up because it becomes more scarce immediately. And then money velocity goes down. This is not like rocket science. They make economics seem very complicated, just like even like things like gravity. It's so complicated, don't bother to understand it. It doesn't exist. But in this case, they make the economy sound, it's, we got economists, chief economists, all these like pundits, all these people. It's common sense. You take money away over time. Looks like next year, according to that first video, central banks worldwide are actually shrinking their balance sheets. And so that's the money supply contracting. Interest rates will immediately go up because money is scarce now, so it's not as abundant. So anything that's more scarce, will be more valued. Like they can't just hand it out anymore at very, very low interest rates because there's less of it. And so we all as a world have to be more conservative in our investments. And so interest rates will go up, and then money supply will go down. That's just a fact. It's like there's less money out there. And so that's why stock market has been jittery right now, and people are realizing that the central banks worldwide are not just pushing money into the system anymore. So if you integrate all the indices worldwide, stock market indices. You take the integral of those, add those all up. That's all the quote unquote equity in the world. Stock market is like the stock is a form of equity in a company. And then if you take a summation of all the cash balances of all the companies in the world and the balance sheets of all the humans in the world, us, our own personal balance sheets, if you add all those things together, that is the money supply that's in the world. And so there's money that exists that either is our own or like loaned to us. So when you don't need to consider the liabilities out there, because a liability will either manifest in as our quote unquote cash, or it will eventually be someone's form of equity. So that liability would be a liability to an individual, but it would represent cash for someone else. And so they sort of offset. Cash and liability offset, so you don't need to double count those, because that liability will appear as cash somewhere on someone else's balance sheet. So that cash and stocks represent very close approximation to the money supply worldwide, and we can see that that those things are contracting, and so naturally stock market valuations would have to right size. And then people will do the smart thing. If stock value is going down, what would they do? They would go into cash. It's like that. That's the first step. You might take the cash and then go buy physical gold or something like that. But if the stock value is either plateauing, which is essentially the same as it dropping, means that you're not getting a return on it anymore. And so you will, most people will cash out strictly from a smart investment point of view, or cash out because they need the money because they're unemployed. And so, but ultimately, when you cash out, you have less buyers, you have more sellers, which will drop the value of the stock, puts pressure on the stock market overall. And so, as we start seeing this decline in stock market valuations worldwide, we'll see more and more people going into cash and then potentially living off that, or choosing other investments that are actually giving a return. And so that's the world that we live in, that's happening right now. And certainly in America, the Bible describes this time as the grinding ceasing, where it's like the economy is slowing down. And so this is all a form of Bible prophecy. This kind of injecting the world with quote unquote liquidity or money, and only giving it to like corporations and few people are able to acquire these loans and start businesses. That's the setup that we live in, and that's why we've gotten to the place that we have, the situation that we have right now. So anyway, I just want to do a quick summary, state of the economy, I guess, and this is just my perspective, but keep an eye out on what's going on, and be very aware that a lot of the numbers and stuff that we're being fed, this optimism, is not rooted in reality.